Welcome to the By Steve podcast.
Good morning and welcome to the By Steve podcast. And today we have a special guest interviewing Jesse, head coach, GB extraordinaire. Introduce yourself, Jesse.
I'm Jesse Sazant, GB Maxi's coach, and a variety of other things. Pleased to be on the podcast, looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming. Passing through Birmingham just on your travels. It's nice to have you. This is the most amount of time we've spent together, I think, isn't it?
Off court, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's awesome to see you.
And most amount of conversations that we've had. So the goal today, we're just going to talk through some Maxi Basketball stuff, get to know a little bit more about Jesse and his thoughts and feelings towards basketball. But I'm going to start off. So I don't actually remember my first impression of you. I remember when we first came into the Maxi program that you wasn't really there in the first kind of like camps or like making selection processes. And then I think I remember my first full remembering moment was we was at Sheffield and I dived out of bounds, I saved a ball, I ran down the other end, and I heard you say, "Well done, good effort, I missed the jump shot," and you were like, "Oh." And from there, I think that was my first real impression of hearing your voice and from a coaching point of view. But the first real conversation we had was in the hallway when you were doing the selection processes. Again, in Sheffield when you're in.
Yeah.
And giving me the most joyous moment of my basketball career, I think. What's your reflections, one of the first impression of me from those early days, one as a player, but two as a person?
Yeah, I think who you are as a person comes through very clearly in the way that you play, on and off court. So I think impressions were around your passion came through massively, your energy came through massively, the desire to succeed, but in a just humble way as far as whatever was needed. Very coachable. I thought your game, as it still is now, was quirky, and so obviously it stood out in that way. That as we've talked about lots over the years, that quirkiness and uniqueness is an asset, and used in the right way has been an X factor for us at times. But yeah, so obviously that stood out. And I think all those intangible things were so clear from the start, and then trying to work out who you were positionally as a player, where your skill set fit in was the next step kind of with it. But I think those first impressions were all around the leadership, the positiveness, just what you brought that enhanced everything we did, and the coachability and humbleness that went with it.
Okay, interesting. So, question off the back of that then, so from a Great Britain basketball point of view, obviously I've been quite tall for the whole of my life. So you get earmarked as a centre from the get-go when you're 6'2", 6'3", in your early years. How would you have evaluated that? With knowing what you know now, what would you have done with me positionally if you picked me up at 16, 18?
I think one of the most interesting things about the Maxi stuff has been, and especially the group that we started with at 40s that are now kind of across the 40s and 45s probably are the exact middle point of this. I think basketball in the last 5 to 10 years has changed far more than at any time in my kind of 30-year involvement. And you're really relevant to that because basically the traditional four what it was 20 years ago and what it is now are two completely different things.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the 50s, 55s play, it's actually quite easy to go, okay, we're going to play mostly an oldish style because that's what they're all comfortable with. You look at the 35s play and they play modern basketball because again, their tail end of their senior career, that's what it was. The 40s is really interesting because you've got both. Mm-hmm. You've got guys who continued to play at a high level up until a couple of years before the 40s or just into the 40s, so have worked with playing in that style, and you've got guys who haven't.
Yep.
And so I think when it comes to you, it's that's where it's been really interesting, is that if you look at it now, you're stuck between those two roles. And I guess a better question than what I would do with you if I met you at 16, because at 16, I would have developed you as a 4/3 because that's what we did with players your size then. But the skill set was very different to what we now expect of a 4/3.
Yeah.
So if I had you at 16, similar. Would have developed some more perimeter stuff than you have, but it wouldn't have necessarily been significant. We wouldn't have been putting huge emphasis on you shooting the ball, etc. and stuff like that necessarily. If you as a 16-year-old now would be a million times different and would not be developing inside. We wouldn't even touch developing an inside game.
No.
Everything would be about shooting, being able to play off the dribble, being able to finish aggressively, but off movement and off penetration, as opposed to off sealing and deep catches in the same way. And so that's where I think, we've got a bunch of kids like this that we've had through academy, whatever, that are that interesting dynamic of how the game has changed and where they fit into it. And I think, I guess quite diverging a bit from the question, but if you think about our three groups that we've worked together on, we've been through that mixture of playing with one big, playing with two bigs, and trying to find that right balance is without a doubt one of the coaching challenges of this to work through. So specific to your question, as a 16-year-old, when you were actually 16, a bit more perimeter stuff, a bit more stuff off the dribble, but you would have been developed in a similar way to where you ended up. If you were a 16-year-old now, totally different how we would look at developing you.
Yeah. So basically, I was ahead of my time, and I just wasn't nurtured.
If that's how you want to take it. I know we'll touch on colours later. So that's how you want to take it. You can take it that way.
Wicked. So keeping in theme with that, the 16s to 18s, obviously, you are, from what I see, you are and have been a part of one of the best basketball academies for teenagers and kids in the country for quite some time. Would you like to just tell me a little bit about the Crusaders and what that's meant to you in the journey that you've been on with that?
Yeah. First, thank you for the kind words with the club. So Crusaders, when I moved from Canada in 2000, just after that, we kind of developed a local club that existed and rebranded it, and it became Crusaders. So it's been, my entire journey in the UK basketball-wise has been built around Crusaders. The club now does all kinds of things, and some amazing people involved that allow it to do what it does, both at performance level, but also at primary schools, at community level for all ages, and so on. The academy is something very close to me. So we were one of the first. Definitely not the first, definitely followed people like Nottingham, Durham, Barking Abbey that kind of started them first, but we're one of the earlier clubs to form an academy, something that has then grown and grown over the last 17 years since we started it. We then had the opportunity to be one of the elite academies through Basketball England and what was called ACE. And then I was lucky enough to kind of be trusted to play a significant role in being commissioner of the ABL and what the academy program we built across the country and that we as a club were lucky to be part of. I think the academy system is phenomenal for British basketball, and it doesn't get used in the way it should. But I like when I talk to coaches from home in Canada, coaching friends in Spain, wherever around the world, they're blown away that, I mean, at Canterbury we have full-time head coach, 3 full-time assistant coaches, full-time strength and conditioning, full-time physiotherapy. It is a resource level beyond what's accessible to that age group around the world.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the way we built it, the professionalism we built it with, the culture, which is huge that we built it with, is something I'm immensely proud of. And I guess the 2 things I'm proudest of with it are the alumni of players.
Yeah.
And I mean that 2 ways. Yes, we have some guys who have gone on to do phenomenal things on court and with their careers and so on, but also just the phenomenal people that have come out of the program because of what we believe in and what we emphasize, who have had success in all walks of life.
Yes.
Kind of off the back of that. And then the second thing is the coaching tree. The number of coaches who have, partially through my England stuff and GB stuff, but more through the academy, that have gone on to do amazing things, that we've kind of been a part of their journey in helping them define who they are as a coach, but what's important in coaching.
Yep.
And being able to then go off and build their own programs. And the number of coaches around the country who have passed through as part of that journey is something phenomenal that I'm super proud of.
Yeah, and I think like for all of the basketball clubs that I've been a part of throughout my basketball career and life, I think being in Great Britain anyway is really hard to be a professional basketball player as it is, but I think like it's really reflective of the skill sets that you get from these clubs and these academies that like instill people to go on into, like you say, the rest of their lives. Like not everyone's going to be a professional basketball player, not everybody's going to be able to play high level, but if you can give people the skill set to be disciplined and focused and committed to a cause, like they will go on to bigger and better things, right? Players and coaches, right?
Yeah, and even something I talk to players about all the time when they're coming into academy, everyone always says that bit to them of only so many players make it and you have to have other plans. I think a really important way to also look at it, the 99% of the players who play professionally and who do make it in that way, make it in a way that they earn enough money to live off of while they're a player.
Mm-hmm.
And they still are going to be 35 and retire with 0 in the bank, without owning a house, and have 30 years of working life left. So even, and I think that strikes home a lot more that actually most of the guys we're talking about, if you fulfill your potential to the absolute maximum, you're going to play at a professional level where you're going to have an amazing life for 10 years. But you're not going to retire with millions in the bank. So I think those bits and understanding where basketball can take you beyond basketball is key. Yeah,
and I think it's interesting because I don't know whether you probably see this, but I see this a lot like in Birmingham where people are, or players are striving to be a BBL player or a D1 player or like a professional player. And they're 26 and they still haven't got to that level. I'm like, you need to let that go. Like, you know, you are doing other things already, but like I know a few guys who are still training to be professionals and they have nothing else kind of really going on other than a part-time job. And I've had guys contact me about doing work in the gym. I'm going to go pro next year. And they're playing Sunday League, West Midlands League, Premier 1. And I'm like, good luck with that. Like, maybe just let that go.
And it's a fine line because, yes, there's an element of you need to be realistic, but I'm yet to meet the 60-year-old who says, you know what I really regret? I regret not getting a job and moving into that stage of life earlier.
Oh, for sure.
So if you're still at a stage of life where financially you can and lifestyle you're happy with and you want to pursue what you love, do it.
Yeah.
Because you're unlikely to regret that side of it in the long run. You may feel naive in the long run or may feel foolish that you chase something that you then realise wasn't realistic. But yeah, but I also think a more relevant point along that is not so much to give up on it, but actually so many of those people haven't done their research to understand what it actually takes to make it at that level.
Yeah.
And one of the things we will always talk about with the academy kids, we'll get them to honestly say what their aspirations are, but then hold them accountable to their actions 24 hours a day, matching up with those ambitions.
Yeah.
And so the player who at 25 is still not very coachable, or still hasn't worked on the skills that they've been told this is the bit that's actually missing, that hasn't even sought out to find out why is it that I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And that just they have their own definition of what they need to do to make it.
Of course.
Well, that own definition hasn't worked for you for 8 years. Why is it all of a sudden work now?
Next year. Yeah.
And I think that bit of actually seeking out criticism, and that's, I think, a massive part of it. Actually finding the people who don't tell them what they want to hear, but tell them honesty. That's the bit that I think lots and lots of players are lacking, or disregard that honesty as he doesn't like me, he doesn't believe in me,
yes,
or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think that kind of builds into the next bit, where we're going to go in relation to I think everybody thinks they're a scorer, right? And you talk about you watch basketball from an uneducated point of view, and the ball goes through the hoop a lot.
Yeah.
And you're everyone should be a scorer, everyone scores on the team. But when you look at it, it's about finding roles, right? And I think one of my things that I probably get criticised for with a couple of the teams that I play for now is that I don't score enough because I'm too passive.
Yeah.
But then I've always been the selfless player that will do the things that nobody else wants to do. But then on times you have to kind of turn the switch a little bit and be a little bit more aggressive. How do you communicate and evaluate talent? Not just with the kids, because we'll talk about the Maxi stuff in a little bit, but how do you evaluate talent when you're looking at roles and responsibilities within a team?
So firstly, I guess we separate those two. Evaluating talent. So evaluating talent, I think there's a couple of key things that come down to it. And it took me a long time to get to this point, but I'm a huge believer in you evaluate talent, not potential, because we all fool ourselves as coaches to think we're good at identifying potential.
Yeah.
And my example of that all the time is, if the NBA guys can spend millions on it and get it wrong every year, why can I, as an amateur coach in England, think I'm any good at it?
Yeah, true.
And so I think firstly it's about, yes, there are elements of potential you take into it, but you need to be much more focused on the now and what they can do, whether that's academy kids or Maxi's kids, when we're talking about roles and stuff like that. And I think the measure every coach makes all the time in evaluating talent on their team is this balance between what positives does this player bring on court and off court, to be fair, and what negatives do they bring on court and off court. So the high risk, high reward player that will bring a lot and score a lot of points, but also might miss 17 shots a game and turn it over 6 times and gamble and miss 5 times on defense, there's a huge element of cost that goes with it. Whereas a player who brings far less might also cost far less. And so I think it's constantly evaluating those two things of what they bring and what they cost. It's also then understanding their ability to turn that up or down as far as the risk. So the ideal player is the player who is willing to take the big shot, can create difficult shots when needed, but understands there's a time and place to do it, and can also do very simple things. But so it's are they able of delivering just one thing, or can they do multiple things within that? And I guess the last thing I'd say in talent, for then going to roles, is it's for a player to be a good basketball player at whatever level you're talking about, there's two major things to me that they need to be able to do. They need to not be shit at anything, and that is just a massive weakness. And they need to have at least one thing they're great at. And I think that we too often get caught up in just players that are good-ish at everything. And those players have a role and are useful, but not as useful as a player who's average at most things, but does two things really, really well. And so again, whether it's evaluating talent at a maxi level or an academy level, whether it's developing talent, and this is where I think, again, from a development point of view, at senior or junior age, some coaches fall in the trap of working too much on players' weaknesses instead of actually making their strength their super strength. And so I think from a talent point of view, it's that. Then when you get into roles, it's a couple things fall into it. It's as a coach, you need to figure out the style you're going to play based on the collective strengths of the team. And because of those collective strengths and where it fits together in the best way, that will mean for some players it will help them and it will suit them, and for some players it won't, and it will mean they are less effective than they could be if you played a different style. And that can be hard as a player, especially when we're talking about national team type stuff where you're not recruiting your team like you are with a pro team, a semi-pro team, and you could bring in the guys that fit. If one of my 4 or 5 best players, really simplistic example, we're going to play fast because our 3 or 4 best players and the bulk of the team really suits them. My best 5 men is decent at this level, but really needs the ball walked up the court to be effective and stuff like that. He's going to be less valuable to us than his skill set through no fault of his own, but because of that balance. So firstly, before you begin into roles, it's what suits the team as far as style of play. Obviously, pro level, you have the luxury of recruiting player. Every player fits your style of play because that's who you're choosing to sign. But it's then understanding. So next thing for me in roles is kind of understanding those super strengths and those weaknesses. And for example, my rotations, which is a big part of roles as far as how you're going to rotate players, quite often will be much more based on those skill sets than they will be on positions and size. So if I have 3 guys who are really our 3 best shooters by far, but overall are not one of our 2 or 3 best players, quite often I would end up rotating through those 3 together. So we always have a floor space. Regardless of position, we always have a shooter on the floor, but I also know if I have 2 or 3 of them on the floor, we're going to struggle to create shots. And so it's trying to figure out balances of lineups is kind of that next thing. And then it's that communication of that and getting players to understand. And I mean, the example we talked about before with some of the quirkiness, there are times where I've turned to you and asked you to take more risks because actually the balance of the team, the way we're playing, I need you to step outside that role and do so. And there's times where it's you need to turn it down because actually our 2 best players are on fire. All everyone else in the court needs to do is not fuck up before they've had a chance to create something, and we'll get something good as a team. And I guess your point on scorers, a good story I use when I was doing the junior national teams, I'd ask all the kids when we had kind of 30, we're down to 30-ish kids for the trial, how many of you were like top 3 scorers in your club team? Every kid would put their hand up. And then I'd go, well, how many of you would be top 3 scorers for us? And finally one kid would be brave enough to go, well, 3 of us. And then, okay, so why the hell am I going to select the rest of you for the team? What are you actually going to do besides score? And so it's finding all those things that complement and that come together, which is why in any sport everyone has an opinion on who should be selected for a national team and whatever and stuff like that, and why the art of it is it's not finding your 12 best players, it's finding your best team.
Yeah.
And how those players will all complement each other, which is far more art than science.
Yeah, for sure. So just if you was to summarize how you pick a team in, like, when you're picking your 12, how do you, like, just quick fire, like, do you take 3 scorers, 4 scorers? Are you looking for, like, a couple of defenders? Like, how do you kind of, like, mold that when you think about what you look for?
Yeah, 7 or 8 best players are automatic, and I think it's that bit I said before about getting your style to suit your best players.
Mm-hmm.
I think you start from, usually it's around 7 or 8. These are the guys who overall I think are our guys, and that might be you have 3 shooters in that group, that might be you have no shooters in that group. Mm-hmm. That might be you have a bunch of guys who can get up and pressure and play aggressive defensively, and it might be you have none. You might have a lot of size, you might have very little size. And so I think it's step 1 is who are my 7 or 8 guys, and therefore how are we going to play.
Okay.
And, like, again, transparency, like Maxi stuff. In year 2 and 3, once we'd already been going, once we already knew guys a lot, we would, if next week when there's first camp, after that first camp, I'd already know 7 or 8 of the guys I'm taking.
Yeah.
And that kind of is set as far as these are our main guys and this is how we're going to play.
Yeah.
It's then looking at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Now starts to be what gaps do we need to fill, who will suit that style that we're playing, and who fits in within there. So, and this again is where, and this is why I love coaching, is it's so different in every situation. So it may be, what's a good example? Sometimes it'll be you're looking for the opposite of what you already have. So I have 2 really good controlling point guards, but neither of them can really pressure the ball and stuff like that. I might be looking for a 3rd point guard who plays completely differently to them. So even though that's not the style we're going to play, knowing that I have an option in the game, I have a guard I can just throw in against another team's strong guard and do something with it. The post player example before, it might be we are going to play quite fast, we are going to be quite small, but I do need to have an option defensively of a genuine 5 that I can use at times against certain teams. Other times it might be, using those exact same examples, I might have that looking for that 3rd guard. Yes, I might have players exceptional at getting up and pressuring defensively, but I don't think realistically he's going to play in our style.
Yeah.
There's no point a different guard who plays the exact same way we play might be the better fit.
Yeah.
Or that 5-man who is on the fringe of making it, actually going, which is no 5-men, no traditional kind of 5-men, might be the way to go, because we have to change our whole way of playing every time they sub in.
Yes.
So it's so in selecting that team, top 7 or 8, how are we going to play, and then evaluating what gaps we've got and what people will bring to that style to go there. And I think, especially with national teams, you don't have the luxury of like thinking in that structured way that you talked about of this many scorers, this many defenders, because you've got what you've got.
Yeah.
And so that becomes my job of, it might be my preference to play a certain way offensively or defensively, but to go away from, we played a lot of zone in Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
My team traditionally do not play a lot of zone, but the team that we had had mismatches everywhere defensively because of kind of the positional irregularity that we had in that team. So it's not that I need to find the guy to fill the gap that ticks a box that we don't have, because that guy wasn't there. So it's my job to play a style that will let us get away with it.
Okay, so moving into, you mentioned the Maxi stuff, and we've kind of like briefly skirted on that. The Maxi program's been amazing. What made you you want to be involved in the Maxi program?
So, Mark Dayson asked me to begin with. So Mark's obviously our lead, leads the SSEM team now, but is someone who I've done works at our academy and has worked with the junior national teams together for years and years and years. And in fact, the team manager that originally the three of us worked together, that him and Mark worked together for years, was playing Maxis at that point. And so Pete Daines is who unofficially basically got Dayson involved, which then got me involved. When I first looked at it, I got involved for one main reason. It was, I loved the idea of something totally out of my comfort zone as a coach to challenge me. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is, if coaching at the level I coach at, to take on a new team or so on, are there challenges every year? Of course there are. But 80-90% of my package, do I know what I'm going to put in? Yeah, I know exactly how I'm going to run practice. I know all those things, with just little tweaks. The thought of Maxis and having to rethink everything. So from physical loading and what practices look like and at what intensity, what actually works and how does that work with an older age group, to technical skill. How much am I going to change any habits of players who have done something the same way for 25 years? Yeah. And so, as you know from having been there, we spend zero time working on that in camps because it's not going to make an impact. So whether I think someone should or shouldn't change their shot, someone should or shouldn't develop something, it's too late, bluntly, in their career to change those habits. Yeah. Mentally, how I engage with the players and build those relationships. Tactically, I don't know if you remember this, I remember our first camp teaching help defense like we would normally teach it, and then quickly realizing that the players were fucked after 3 minutes and making them get to the help line every time the ball was on the other side and so on, and the penetration and the ball movement isn't the same speed as that, so we can take some shortcuts and adjust. So what made me want to get involved was just that challenge of making me rethink everything I thought I knew about coaching in basketball and what did apply and didn't apply and how should I tweak it and go from there was what got me involved to begin with. Good.
Tangent question. In the GB Maxi trial program, what's the quickest you've seen somebody on court and been like, nope? If you literally just kind of
coaches are judgmental bastards. So that's but again, a good coach, and I'd like to think that this reflects me. There's also been times where I've thought that on a first appearance, but then over the day changed my opinion and stuff. It's that we ensure players get that fair opportunity, but and I think where, if you go back to all that stuff we're talking about all the factors we put into it, I also think that's where players can feel that they got an unfair opportunity, but it's their perception and my perception of what we're looking for are completely different things. And which is why you get that misunderstanding sometimes. But coaches get it wrong all the time, but yes, with the numbers we have with Maxis, you need to make some decisions pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because and this will come to a question in a little second, but I think when I first got involved, there was a lot of people within my basketball community, whether quite close or on the periphery, that didn't really understand why I'd gone to that process. And a lot of them thought that I shouldn't have been there and whatever. But some of those people have been to the camps and seen a different version of me as a player, but also realised that the level that they thought they were at is not close to that. And I think it's really quite interesting because one particular person who I go to a session with, and he was like, I've signed up, I'm going to go. If you make it, I will make it. And he got to lunchtime and went home. And he was like, this isn't for me, it's too hard, I don't know how to do any of these things. And he was quite respectful, to be fair, because after the fact he was like, I've seen a different version of you than I've ever seen at said sports all on a Sunday afternoon, whenever it is. And I think that's quite interesting. And I think like as a GB program, obviously with it being a masters thing, I don't know if you hear this, but I think a lot of the chatter that I hear is like it's not like a real GB program. And still people now are like, oh, it's not a real GB program, you're old, you don't know. How do you, like, I don't want you to defend it, like, but what do you think when you hear, if you hear things like that, when people are like, oh, it's old people playing basketball, it's not real GB?
In the middle is where I'd fall, in that it's the reason it is something to be exceptionally proud of, and the reason it is a genuine national team program, the level of expectation and commitment that goes with it is so far beyond what people realize, and both the physical commitment between camps. I don't think people understand how much conditioning goes into when we go to a tournament and having to play 6 games in 9 days, that the work that goes in that side, the intensity of camps, the challenging of players to be the best versions of themselves, the infrastructure behind it as far as the support team that's there and how much work goes into us being competitive. The fact that especially on the men's side we have huge numbers that are trialing to be involved, and actually to actually become one of those 12 is very, very difficult. And we have numerous players who have been to a European or World Championship and not been selected the following year because, again, the level of talent that is there keeps rising. And the teams we are playing against at the top end are also the exact same. They are very well organised, very high level basketball teams, players who have played at really high levels. We've obviously, with our 40s team by itself, in the 3 tournaments we've played Olympic gold medalists, NBA lottery picks, multiple NBA players obviously. So the level is incredibly high, and the bit that we do need to be slightly realistic about, the bit that tempers it slightly, we know, in the same for all the countries we're playing, we don't necessarily have all of the best players in the country who want to play that. No different to I guess junior and in your typical senior national team, but a higher percentage of that potentially, because different players at this stage of life have different motivations, different physical conditions, and so on and stuff like that. But no, as many people have said over the last few years, frustratingly, from their point of view, without a doubt, the first few years of taking Maxis these tournaments, the commitment and professionalism and expectation were our preparation phase and building phase were without a doubt a higher level than the GB junior national teams going to FIBA European Championships and stuff. So it's legit. It is high level.
Yep. And a big part of that for you, as coach and as director, you have implemented your colour system into all of the process, which is now like just a running joke throughout all of the teams and all of the camps of people wanting to know whether they're a yellow, blue, green or red. You stand by this quite strongly as like a process of evaluating people, right?
A process of developing emotional intelligence, of people understanding themselves. I wouldn't say evaluating, because my opening line in it always, profiling isn't a label, isn't an excuse. It's just something to help. It's a tool. It is what it is. So firstly, huge appreciation to Chris Hallam, who kind of trained me in this and who first got me involved in it through national teams. But yeah, these colour profiling is something we've done for 15 years at the academy, that we do it at school. In my working life, I use it in a variety of things. So yeah, it's something I believe in strongly. It's something I'm now a trainer in and deliver training in private and public sector with. But I think everyone would agree. You won't get a single person who doesn't agree with the fact that emotional intelligence is such a key skill in life and in basketball. You also get very, very few people who said, okay, how do you train people to be more emotionally intelligent, who can give an answer besides life experience?
Yeah.
And what the colours do is in a way that is very fun, that is engaging, that I think the biggest thing, it sticks, and like you said, the way it's referred to through all the camps, and that new players being desperate to know because they just hear it referred to all the time. I think that colour profiling tool is exceptional as a way to develop, giving you resources to develop your emotional intelligence and resources to interact in a better way with your teammates and to be understood better by your teammates. And so I'm a huge believer in it. Like I said, I use it through everything I do work-wise because of the impact that I believe it has. And I think it's two ways. It really has an impact when you have a team who has been through, a team, whether that's a sports team or a work team who has been through that profiling together. It gives you a tool to amend other people's behavior. So it gives you a language to enable people to be more or less of something in different moments, to adapt to what a situation needs. And it also gives you a resource to understand your skill set in different situations and how you may need to amend that skill set. And kind of when we were talking earlier about you and like asking for more or less of different things in games, there are times where we use the colours to talk about exactly that. That I need to be more blue, I need to be more yellow right now. Without that language of the red, green, yellow, blue, I don't really know how I communicate that I need you to be more blue this next shift with you.
Yes.
Without a 3-minute conversation, or more likely in trying to get it across quickly without pissing you off by the language I use and not understanding and feeling that you've been criticized and told off, as opposed to, I know you have the skill set within you and I need this skill set right now. So
I think that's quite interesting as well, because I think when you refer to that and you say to like having this like 3-minute conversation about giving information and then not either offending or whatever, those colours really bed in as well, like the understanding that yes, I am a yellow extrovert on the basketball court, but I'm also like a really emotional person. So you delivering a message in the right way for me is more important than for someone else who is in that red category, who you can shout at a little bit and give them a direct message and they'll be like, okay. Whereas I'll be like, okay. And still go do it, but think about it for 4 days afterwards and sulk about it. And what I will do is when we've tied this up, I'll put, you can send me a link for some more information on this, like for the colour stuff, because without going down probably a 30-40 minute wormhole about this, it's a really interesting way of figuring out a lot about yourself, a lot about the people around you, and also like what people bring, not just in the basketball, but just in life in general, because these things obviously transfer to work as well. And you know, that stressed, non-stressed scenario and how people change in certain situations, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think it's applicable in everything. I know dating is one of your big topics on the podcast. I'll be honest, anyone who gets past 2 or 3 dates with me is probably going to get profiled and probably understand it better.
But what do they know about it? Or you just subliminally like
slipping
messages?
No, because I talk about it so much that believe in it, they then want to be profiled to find out what they are. And so they get a mini version of the presentation and we go from there. But yeah.
Is this what you class as foreplay?
There's all kinds of ways colours can be used in that way as well, Steve. That's a different podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think as a tool in understanding people and in getting along, it's massive. And we talked about how it's used in different contexts. Without a doubt, it's something that as long as people understand And like I think profiling, that's why I was open with this one of my first lines. Profiling is a really misleading title for what we're going to do, because it isn't a label in any way. It just lets you understand what you can do more easily and what takes more energy. So okay, perfect example, your podcast. How much planning do you normally put into what you're going to say and do in the podcast, and how much of it is just off on?
Zero.
Yeah. So by default, as a yellow, the creative, reactive, spontaneous is really natural to you. And you do that and it feels right and so on. For this podcast, what did you do?
I got up early, wrote a list, got really stressed, had a bit of anxiety, rewrote the list, rewrote the list, and then showed you the list.
Yeah. And so, two things about our colours from that. One, you could do this, you could be really organised and planned and whatever, but it took more emotional energy to do that than it did to do your natural, spontaneous.
Yeah, I will definitely have a nap after this.
Yeah. So, so we can all be all colours when we need to be, it just takes more effort for them to be there. Flip side, where my profile is much more information-based than emotion-based compared to yours, you showing me that list when we went out to eat before makes me far more relaxed in this because I know what's coming.
Yeah.
And so whereas if it was the other way around, showing you the list would be irrelevant because you're probably going to take the conversation 12 different ways anyways from what's on my list. It wouldn't help to have reassured you. It would have almost boxed you in on what you can say.
Yeah.
So again, that's an example of how understanding each color, understanding your color and each other's colors can be used to make things work in a better way and everyone to be happier.
I agree. And I remember we had this conversation, I think it was in Italy, when we were talking about doing this. So it's taken us quite a while to get to podcast point. And I think I said to you in Italy, like, is there anything that I can't ask you? And you were like, just ask. And I just won't answer it. And then in my head, it's going to be like a podcast of me asking you a question. You're going, no comment. No comment.
It'd be great content,
no comment.
Steve.
Yeah, so I was like, I probably need to prepare for this one because otherwise it's just going to be absolutely terrible. So yeah, we'll put some more information out about like the links for that kind of stuff so people can go and have a little bit of a look about it. So just finalising like the Maxi stuff. So favourite moments, best memories. If you were to pick 3, like, which is a bit on the spot, but like if you give me 3 or 4 of your favourite moments, not necessarily 40s, just in general.
Okay, I think let's narrow it down to 3. So I think the number one, I'll call this a moment. It's multiple moments. You asked me before about kind of why I got involved with Maxis and talked about the challenge it would bring to me as a coach, as an on-floor coach. What I didn't expect from it is it to be as rewarding on a personal level as coaching 16 to 19-year-olds that I've mainly done, where you play such a role in their formative years. It's actually been as rewarding or more. And I think we were talking about this briefly earlier. It comes from having a group of people who have a shared goal. And the fact that everybody involved across the 10 teams we took to Pesaro, across men and women, are there because they want to be in a performance program where they're pushed to be better, where they're challenged to be the best version of themselves, constantly pushed out of their comfort zone to try and achieve something, to try and achieve a medal, and so on at that. But because of that shared goal, the closeness that it brings is actually what makes Maxi special, and it's the relationships that come out of it. And those relationships show up in different ways. Go back to the colour stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
The you and Scotty's friendship is an example, but the connection that we have, we're so different to that, but how much we value each other is equally one of those. And so moments that, so that first example, moments, things like walking down to breakfast, we're at one of these tournaments, and there's 100 people wearing the same t-shirt as you are.
Yeah.
And 100 people with the same ambition and same goal, who all, whatever performance you have that day, whether you win, lose, play well, play badly, are together and with you. So I think that the breakfast example is the one that symbolizes it to me, but it is that united goal and that togetherness would be one thing. I think the second moment would be one of the things that we have in common, we both are massive advocates about men's mental health and the stereotype, the old school stereotype of be a man being a damaging stereotype. And so I love that we've been able to build a culture, specifically within the 40s especially, but I think there's aspects of this across the whole program, but especially in the 40s, where we've built this culture of an absence of those behaviors and the macho-ness and whatever.
Yes. And
again, two examples of it are in Argentina, when we sat around in a hotel room after our last game and kind of each of us talked about our highlight of the trip, and almost none of it was basketball, and almost all of it was incredibly vulnerable from people who had been through difficult moments with bereavement, with personal life, with whatever, and how what Maxi's meant to them. And the example I use all the time that kind of links to that, and it's what I said actually as my favourite moment of the trip. I love the fact that 40s group greets each other with hugs. And I mean hugs, I don't mean man hugs and whatever. Like that again, just the absence of that need to appear macho and not appear vulnerable or whatever else would be the second moment of just the way we are together. And I think on court, it's ironically 2 losses, but I think our Italy loss in Malaga and the Georgia loss this past year in Pesaro, playing teams with a much higher pedigree than us, with players who have played at a much higher level than we have, who both those moments after each of those games where the coaches and superstars of those teams are pulling people aside and pulling coaches aside to talk about the quality of team that we are. I think those moments for me represent a lot as a coach in what we're trying to achieve with this, and the level we are aspiring to get to. The fact that we are in a game with a chance to win it against either of those teams that on paper we should not have an opportunity to. I think those are moments that when we do achieve a final, a medal, or whatever else, those are important checkpoints in that journey for the group as far as proving we can play at this level and just needing to be a little bit better and find a little bit more to get there. Yeah,
I agree with you, and I think throughout that process for me, I think you're very aware of the fact that like I have been forever like searching for like this validation as a basketball player, and Maxi has given me that more than I ever thought it really would. But I think you're right there. When we go to every tournament, we see those same Italy players and we greet them and they're like, oh, you're back, like it's good to see you, and they know that they're going to get a tough game. And you know, I think the Georgia game was quite interesting because I think they always like had the beating of us, but even afterwards, like a couple of their players were like, you just competed all the way to the end. Like, and I think, you know, from a personal point of view, for someone who has played in the NBA, played in the Italia ABC leagues, and you've got guys who have played at those levels who respect you as a basketball player and as a coach, like it gives you that little bit of validation. And I think
100%.
Like, I know even after Malaga, I was still kind of like, well, like, am I any good at this? Like, And I think the more I've done this process, the more like I sit at peace with that. Like, okay, like if my life had been different, I could have played somewhere else. And if I'd not made these life decisions, who knows where my basketball like playing career would have ended up, whether it was in Great Britain or outside of that, if I'd been coached properly in my teenage years, because no one ever did that. And that's where that those things where you say you're like a little bit like obscure when you play and you have like this quirkiness, it's just like that lack of formal coaching actually helped me in certain points, but didn't in others. But you're right, I think like some of my better memories are of other teams just being like, yeah, we won, but you guys gave us as much as you could. And I think we've had teams where we have had groups of players who have been so committed to trying to win and trying to like get across, like find those medals or find those standings, where we've given everything we can. And if you don't win, that sucks. But if your peers are like, we respect you. I think outside of Great Britain, people or other countries are fully aware of what the state of British basketball is in. And for people who don't know anything about that, they're just like, well, you're all basketball players. Like, it's a country. Like, but we don't have the best pathway. We don't have the best routes to getting people to pro level. There's certain thoughts and feelings, one about the BBL and like the National League systems, about the standard of those, or there has been over the years. And I think it's probably as high as it's ever been now. But I think like when countries look at us from a basketball nation, they're like, yeah, you're not very good at this. Okay, so on the spot, what was your initial reaction? I think I've asked this before, I don't think you've answered it properly. What was your initial reaction of Dr. Octopus when I went behind the back 2 times, left-handed layup in, I think we were in Mercia, weren't we? And like, what was your in your brain moment? What was your reflection of that like?
Easy. We have a phrase we talk about hero or zero moments, that like you want to go outside the comfort zone, and my comfort zone. If you make a choice that's outside of my comfort zone, one of 2 things are going to happen. You're going to make the play and you're a hero and great, or you're not going to, and you know full well you're either getting screamed at or subbed out at the next opportunity. And but again, that's a skill to be able to take those moments and to have the confidence to do so. And especially knowing that, because we're transparent about it, if I do this and mess it up, I know what the consequence is going to be. And so make the play. It's not a bad shot if it goes in.
I have absolute basketball blindness about that 10-second window as well. I don't know what happened. I don't know how any of it happened. I don't know how the ball went in. And that story kind of lives forever in the 40s kind of like memory bank, I think.
But to sum all that up in a few words, it's probably oh shit, good job.
Yeah.
Was basically what went through my head.
Yeah. The only thing I actually heard through that whole process was the girls like in the background going, whoa, whoa, whoa. Of
course you heard the girls, Steve, because you're yellow and you heard the praise.
Exactly. Yeah. Not you screaming or like having a little mini panic attack. Okay, so obviously from a coaching point of view, you've been a coach for quite some time. When did you realise that you wasn't quite good enough at basketball and was better off being a coach?
Really young. So, I've been really lucky to have some amazing opportunities and just life to fall in a way that let me find these things. So I started coaching very young, 14-ish. As in like community stuff, just helping out locally, but enjoyed it, so started to get more and more into it. Was lucky enough that some adults gave me opportunities that probably I was nowhere near mature enough for, without realizing that, being an arrogant teenager. Mm-hmm. But my last year of high school, so as an 18-year-old, I coached my high school team, which, again, from a basketball point of view, I was capable of doing. From a people and personalities point of view, that's again, something that makes me chuckle in hindsight, that to be coaching your peers and your friends and whatever. It is an obviously incredibly difficult thing to do at any age, let alone as an 18-year-old. So, but that year was the last year I played seriously, and I was, again, lucky enough through meeting the right people and through working hard that I was an assistant coach with university basketball by 19. So, so my focus once I went to university and got those opportunities has been coaching ever since. I couldn't even tell you the last time I played basketball in any, even just a pickup game. I couldn't even tell you when the last time I played was now. All coaching for coaching focus for a very, very long time. Stopped playing seriously at 18 and stopped playing at all, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s, probably the last time I played pickup or local league or whatever, or something like that.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so last couple of things before we tie it off. So what's next for you? Obviously you decided to take a little bit of a break from the Maxi stuff. What does the next 12 months look like for Jesse?
Like the Maxis to me is a break, without a doubt, not a departure. And I'm still obviously on the fringes of what's happening, but make sure to give people space when I'm taking that break to do what they need to do. I want to get back involved with Maxis at some point. That just as happens, sometimes life gets in the way, and a few other things happening right now. But from a basketball point of view, we will see, working with Sadie in the leadership group, what's my route back in what way I get back involved.
45's men's.
So
run it back.
So we'll see. And I've really loved the coaching that I've done with Maxis, and I've really loved the program lead stuff. Whether it's tenable to do both simultaneously is an interesting question. And I'm passionate about what the Maxis bring and growing that overall. So we'll see what the best way to achieve that is when I come back into it later this year, hopefully, when stuff is resolved. So that's next basketball wise, and we'll see. Like again, whatever you planned, life always has different diversions that it causes. So we'll see where it goes.
Very much so. There's one thing that I want to close on when we lock this off, but like if there's, from your final thoughts point of view, like what would you like to put out there just to close this off before I have a closing statement?
I think, if you look at all the different things we've talked about, it all, whether it was talking about the junior stuff, whether it was talking about advice for players that think they're going to make it despite not having made it at 25, 26, if you think about your journey, if you think about the Maxi stuff, I think a lot of it comes back to, and obviously you'll have heard this over and over through the stuff I do with Maxis, it comes back to taking your opportunities. And actually, I stole this line from someone, but life's a lot easier when you understand that everything that happens is your fault. And if you get away from being a victim and away from always focusing on the external things that are unfair, because you know what, life is unfair, and it's unfair for all of us, and it's unfair in different ways, and as we talked about earlier, you never know what's going on behind closed doors in anyone else's life either. So being able to succeed in whatever way you define success, on court and off court, I think really just does come back to taking opportunities of the things you can control, do whatever they are at the highest level. And if you do that, life in general will work out for you, and things will work out. And I think that's the overarching thing I tie that together with. And then the other thing I'd say, I know I've said this to you privately, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on, I think the stuff you do with this in openly talking about emotion and openly being vulnerable and stuff like that is something that like I said, I know I've said privately to you, but that I praise you speaking publicly about, because I think working in education, especially working with elite athletes in education, you see a lot of young men who struggle with that stuff, who feel like they're the only person in the world struggling with it because we're told to hide it as men. And so I just publicly want to say to you what I've said privately. I think you speaking out and helping to make it the norm and acceptable to talk about those things is massive. So I have a lot of respect for you for doing that.
Thank you very much. Don't make me cry on my own podcast. So I will close this off with something, following on that line. It's I haven't enjoyed basketball as much as I have over the last 3 years, and I thank you for that. It's shown me a lot about what I could have done and what I am able to do, and I actually really don't enjoy playing basketball at Sunday League now because there's a lot of idiots there, and understanding that there's a bit more space on the court than I knew there was when you used to shout at me to get out to the 3-point line and just spread the floor a little bit. I want to thank you for enabling me over the last few years, and I am not able to talk for everybody else, but I'm sure the impact that you've had across the board has been amazing, because if this tiny little bit of me has been affected by the time that we've had together, I'm sure that you have had a ripple effect with the pebble in the lake, river, throughout everybody's life.
Thank you.
Keep doing what you're doing, and coaching 45 for Athens sounds like a great idea. Anything else you want to close before I close this off?
No, just thank you. Appreciate you having me on here, and yeah, it's been fun.
I appreciate you more, and that is us for today, and this is the longest podcast to date, hour and 6 minutes. Have a nice afternoon, everybody, and we will see you soon.
Welcome to the By Steve podcast.